10 years ago, a good friend of mine, Charlie Tongue, who owns a fine sailboat, those of us sailors will know the Handbook Rassy 42, and had sailed across the Atlantic east to west to St. Lucia, in the what you call the Caribbean and I still call the Caribbean, asked me to join his crew on the way back. And although I've done a little bit of sailing, I'm not remotely a sailor, just good enough to sort of stand a watch with close supervision of the skipper and everybody else. But he wanted me to join and do the provisioning, figure out what we needed to buy and what we're going to eat and how to stow it, and to do the cooking, and also to write the blog. So I claimed I was by far the busiest person on the boat. But it was an extraordinary trip, and I'm going to just read a little extract from a chapter of the book, which was based on what I did to figure out what the cooking was going to be and prepare recipes and so forth, but also includes episodes from the blog. And this was an episode from the blog, written, I must admit, when I was in a rather high dudgeon after a pretty rugged attempt at cooking breakfast in bad conditions. So here it is, cooking at sea. Cooking at sea can be readily summarized: rarely easy, often difficult, frequently frustrating, and sometimes dangerous. But it's always an intriguing challenge, and the difficulties are more than compensated for by the satisfaction of producing a good meal under less than ideal conditions. A task that seems pretty simple and straightforward on land can become a major challenge even in calm seas if the boat is heeling significantly on a reach, or worse, rolling on a downward run, or much worse, beating up wind. The conditions on this day were not untypical of the voyage. Neroli, that's the name of the boat, of course, was close hauled on port tack. And while that means in layperson's terms that the boat is generally tending to lean to the right as you look forward, this is far from guaranteed. And actually, on this day, just struggling with the page turns here, on this day, occasionally, quite often, some combination of autopilot, helmsman's action, wind and or wave produces a surprising and unheralded move in the other direction. Now, I'd been asked by the skipper to cook a proper breakfast, as he described it. Usually, if conditions were not good, we'd have something pretty simple, cereal and other stuff. But he felt that the crew had been working hard for a couple of days and needed a nice break, and so proper breakfast, which means cooking bacon and or eggs and toast and other things like that, and conditions were not good for doing this. To add to the fun of cooking in these conditions, encounters with large waves produce an additional kind of unexpected movement in the form of a discontinuous jump that may be in any direction at all, including up and or down. And if one is holding a container, you and the container may move sharply in the same direction because one is holding fast to a part of Nerola's interior as directed by the old maxim, one hand for yourself and one for the ship, while the contents of the container, if open, may not feel constrained to move in a similar way, and therefore become separated from the aforesaid container, so that if, as is depressingly usual, a further sharp movement in another direction, e.g. horizontal, occurs, then those contents are very unlikely to make it back into the container. And if reading this paragraph has caused you to become somewhat short of breath, as it has me, then perhaps it gives you an insight into the anxiety felt by the ship's cook as he struggled to prepare victuals that met the expectations of the demanding skipper and his ever-hungry crew. And I just add, so parenthetically, if for those of you who don't sail, if you're kind of below decks with no reference, you have absolutely no warning when sudden events occur. And so you have to kind of be prepared for those, and it's basically impossible. So there I was following the one hand for maxim, although in my case, and especially when cooking, several more appendages than two hands are called into play. A hip is wedged into the corner between the stove and the working surface. A knee is braced against the counter opposite. My left elbow is wrapped around the post conveniently located nearby, with that hand holding a saucepan. My other hand is clutching the box of eggs in an attempt to keep it under control without breaking the first egg into the bowl, in which I'm hoping to assemble the eggs prior to scrambling. Now, the skipper's thoughtfully equipped Nerola's Galley with an extensive range of colourful non-slip pads, probably developed by the scientists who brought you sticky notes. The idea is you put one of these on the working surface and then place a container on the pad. The pad won't slide, nor will the container. Unfortunately, as you'll very soon learn, other degrees of freedom are sometimes available. I managed to break 8 eggs into the bowl and placed it securely, as I thought, on one of the aforesaid non-slip pads. As I attempted to free up a limb to reach past the stove to open a drawer to extract a fork to beat the eggs. And by the way, another hand is needed here to hold the drawer open while getting out the implement. Neroli rolled sharply. Charlie doesn't like me to use phrases like lurched wildly, or I'd have definitely done so here. 3M, I have to say, can be proud of the technical achievements of their boffins. The non-slip material performed superbly. Neither mat nor bowl slid. But as the angle increased, most of the contents of the bowl emptied neatly into the sink. Disaster, you might think, but no, not yet. At least the eggs are still somewhat constrained and perhaps a rescue can be effected. There's not a moment to be lost. They're about to slide down the centrally placed drain, since just for an infuriating moment, the vessel is level. Digression. Another blog may have to address the challenge. I think I'm just going to shortcut this because I go on a long digression about trying to pour hot water into a coffee cup. When you don't know what the hell is going on. The whole galley is lean. You have no exterior frame of reference. A horizon would be nice. You can see the tone of my complaints. The horizon would be nice, but it can't be seen because of the lean. All you can see is water racing by just outside the window, which I should say porthole, looking as if it wants to get in, but that's the end of the digression. Then Neroli returned to her previous angle, and the eggs slopped to the side of the sink, out of reach of the drain. A mild curse, a couple of dropped implements, a risky move with no hands attached to Neroli, and I scooped up the eggs, aided by the quality that I'd been aware of but never fully appreciated. That if you can get part of a raw egg under control, the rest tends to follow. And we all know that, but we don't often actually use it. So I got that with a few coffee grounds and some scraps from Patty's breakfast bowl back into the pan. Luckily, 3 more eggs remained in the box, and these were very soon added to the bowl to make up the deficit. Determined to avoid a recurrence, I moved the bowl to starboard, downhill, to the outer edge of the galley, kitchen, next to the locker, cupboard, safely away from the sink, with the added security of the bulkhead wall to wedge the bowl against. Now I had to light the stove, a process requiring at least 3 hands, one to hold the lighter, one to turn the knob and hold it pressed in for several seconds, and of course one more to keep me from flying in any one of the several available directions. As ignition occurred, Neroli repeated her earlier move, this time with a charming little extra twist, just sufficient to bounce the bowl away from the bulkhead and enable it to tip again. I'm nearly there. This is nearly over. I lunged with a gas lighter. What effect that was supposed to have, I can't imagine. Perhaps instantly baked the escapees into immobility. As the raw eggs exited the bowl pretty much in their entirety, they briefly marshaled themselves, as raw eggs do, and then began to flow across the working surface towards the albeit distant sink. For a moment I thought I had a chance to corral them again using a couple of sponges and dishcloth in my hands. They had at least half a meter to go across the top of the chest-type fridge. This being a marine-grade piece of equipment, I was confident that it would be equipped with seals around the industrial weight lid that would keep out the Atlantic, obviously, let alone a few wayward uncooked eggs. No such luck. As the leading edge of the viscous mass reached the lid, it hesitated only briefly before taking a sharp downward turn, flowing swiftly and silently into the fridge. The aforementioned property of connectivity of raw egg ensuring that the entire mass, yolk, white, and all, took the trip. I uttered several short words of Anglo-Saxon origin, mostly beginning with earlier letters of the alphabet. The credit for that, by the way, goes to Winston Churchill. I stood silently for a few moments picturing the scene within the carefully stowed fridge and considering what effect 8 raw eggs would have as they flowed past the contents and accumulated at the bottom. It was a nightmare. I started to raise the lid of the fridge. As I did so, I could hear the other crew members, fresh from a restful night in their berths, chatting with the skipper in the cockpit as they relaxed over their morning cup of tea. I let the lid drop, reached for the cold cereal container. They need never know.
Oh, fabulous.
Teresa?